This is a cuttlefish. Now there is a fishery for cuttlefish in the UK. It's mainly found in the English Channel. It's highly variable depending on the seasons and depending on the abundance of this animal in our waters. Very similar to a squid in that it's got the 8 smaller tentacles and the 2 longer ones. The big difference is the presence of a cuttle bone here, which provides support for the animal. Now these are the white, sort of oval, oblong shaped bits and pieces that you find on the beach. They're often given to budgies. This species is caught mainly as a bycatch species, a very valuable bycatch species, an otter and beam trawls. Cuttlefish are currently rated 3 out of 5 by the Marine Conservation Society for sustainability.
I'm going to show you how to prepare and cook cuttlefish. It's one of the 3 cephalopods. You've got squid, octopus and cuttlefish is the third. It's probably the least well known and is actually probably the nicest of the lot to eat. Like squid and octopus, it's very versatile. You can casserole it or you can cook it very, very rapidly, and if it's cooked rapidly it takes around 30 seconds to cook through. The preparation requires me to pull out the tentacles, to remove the modified internal shell, which is probably one of the most recognisable parts of the cuttlefish, and right underneath that, the top of the actual tube or the head here, you've got a little pocket of ink. The ink from cuttlefish is very often harvested and pasteurised and used for colouring risottos but also pasta, and we're going to be locating that, removing it and adding it to a risotto to make classic risotto nero. So for preparation, I'm going to take hold of the tentacles and just gently pull those away from the head, and as they come out we've got some roe in there and other bits and pieces. What I wanted to be very careful about is not popping the ink sac, which is still inside the head. The modified internal shell, or this little bit, has popped out, and again that's very often seen as a beak sharpener. And then you have a small loose piece of membrane which needs to be pulled open, and as you open that and turn it inside out you can see the ink sac. That ink sac's got quite a lot of ink in it, and it's amazing just how dark and how black that can make the risotto. What I want to do is just pull that ink sac out very carefully. That's going to be reserved. And then I want to slip my thumb underneath the skin and pull the skin away from the actual head. And as that comes away, you take off the little fins that are on the outside of the head itself. That's very good for stock, so that can be kept for something else. The actual tentacles themselves, we want to cut just below the eye, so I'm going to use a knife just to cut below the eye there. And that and all the guts from there can be discarded. I want to pop my finger through the middle of the cuttlefish tentacles just to make sure that the beak is removed. The beak is the mouthpiece. And then using scissors, I'm actually just going to trim the longer tentacles away from the rest of the tentacle. On the long tentacles, there's lots of little small suction pads on there which can be a little bit gritty, so they're much better removed, and those, like the membrane, can go into a stock. That can then be washed, and then we basically have the head, which needs a little bit of washing and trimming. We want to pull all those little bits away, and then that's ready to be sliced and ready for cooking. So the cuttlefish head can be either pan-fried, it can be stewed, or it can be cut and sliced. If you want to barbecue it, what you want to do first of all is trim off little nodules which are part of the head. You want to trim those level with the head. You then want to score the head in very much the same way that you do for squid, and then you can season it, and you can char grill it on a barbecue or in a char grill pan for around a minute or so, 30 seconds on either side, just to cook it through completely. What I need to do today is trim it, and then we're going to slice it, and what I'm going to do is poach it in the risotto. So what I'm going to do is just take the tip of my knife and just trim those little pieces. They're quite hard, but underneath it's quite soft. I'll trim those away. And then I'm going to cut it into really fine strips. Now cuttlefish has got the most amazing sweet seafood flavour. It needs very, very rapid cooking if you want to stir fry it or pan fry it, and it takes around 25-30 seconds to cook through completely in much the same way as squid. if you're lucky enough, you will find you've got the ink sac, and there's a little bit in there. I'm going to snip it open in a minute and add it to my risotto. If you don't have that, the option, which you can keep in the fridge, is to have some pasteurised cuttlefish ink. It's sometimes squid, but it's predominantly cuttlefish. It's pasteurised, it's got a long shelf life, and you can just keep it actually in the cupboard ready until you're ready to use it. And if you don't have enough today from that, because the cuttlefish I was using is quite small, I will open that one and use that as well. With the tentacles generally on a larger cuttlefish, and they can be 3 or 4 times the size of this, can be a little bit on the tough side, and I would normally suggest you wouldn't really do anything but casserole these. But today, because they're a little bit smaller, what I'm going to do is just stir them into the risotto right at the last minute. For the risotto, we've actually started that already, and what we've done is heated some butter and added some onion to that and softened that really well to get the onion completely translucent. We've then added the rice. The risotto rice we've used today is carnaroli. We've coated that in the butter, and that's ready to then add the stock. We've added a little bit already. All we've got to do now is add the last bit, and that risotto wants to be cooked until it's still al dente. You've got a little bit of sort of flouriness to the centre of the grain when it's ready to cook. So I've got some shellfish stock here. You can use fish or shellfish stock. The method for making the stock is on the How To Prawn DVD. I'm going to stir that in, and that rice will be cooked when there is still a little bit of a floury grain to the centre. It wants to be al dente. Now at this stage we can think about adding the ink, and what I'm going to do is take a pair of scissors and just snip that little bit of ink and see if I can just squeeze that into the risotto. And it's very, very messy. And it'll just stir that in. It goes the most unbelievable black traditional colour. I'm not using gloves. It's advisable to use gloves, and it really does just cook that in a little bit out of that one little cuttlefish. Got ink everywhere. So we've added that tiny bit of squid ink, and it's got a really deep jet black colour. And once that last little bit of stock has absorbed, you're happy with the seasoning, you can then just add your cuttlefish. If you want a little bit of colour on this prior to going into there, you can just season it lightly and pan fry it in some really hot oil for a few seconds to get some colour, and then just pop it in there today. But as soon as it's coated in the risotto and the ink, it just mingles very well. I'm going to drop those in. The tentacles are probably going to take the longest, so I'll pop those in and get those cooking early on. Stir that through. And then if you'd like, you can add just a little bit of chopped parsley just to break up the colour a little bit. And that's really just ready to go. And the key thing with something like this is you need to be sitting down with a glass of wine in one hand and a bowl ready to go, and as soon as the cuttlefish is done, it's the same with squid, you could add that as well, you're ready to eat.